They came without warning, not in peace, not in conquest, but in the cold efficiency of resource extraction, like we were nothing more than a dying forest before the blade. The skies over Earth split open with silence. No grand declaration, no light show of diplomacy, just dark, skeletal machines descending from the void. The world watched in disbelief as cities froze mid-motion. Traffic halted, screens glitched, power grids blinked and died. Then came the harvesters, towering arachnid-like automatons that drilled into oceans, forests, even the mantle, sucking life and mineral alike with no regard for consequence. We never saw their faces, only received a single transmission that played on every frequency, translated into every tongue. This planet is forfeit. Your biological function is inefficient. Evacuate or expire. No demands, no parley, no mercy. They called themselves the Thalzar, a consortium of hyper-intelligent species bound by ancient galactic law. To them, humanity was background noise, a cosmic accident too primitive to matter. The UN collapsed in days, governments fractured, satellites fell like dying stars. Billions fled inland, hiding in ruins, sewers, caves, anywhere the harvesters couldn't reach. And in the ash of fallen cities, something primal woke up. We didn't unite under flags. We didn't rally under leaders. We clawed and bled our way into resistance, not because we thought we'd win, but because surrender wasn't in our DNA. First, it was teenagers hijacking drones with salvaged code. Then, a rogue AI from a shut-down lab took control of a scrap satellite and kamikazed it into a harvester's weak spot, its cooling core. That's when we saw it bleed blue fire. That's when we knew they weren't invincible. Across the world, the word spread like a heartbeat: fight. We had no fleets, no gravity weapons, no star drives. What we had was desperation sharpened into creativity. Old subway tunnels became bases. Smartphones turned into signal jammers. We wore their arrogance like armor and used it against them. They underestimated our chaos, our unpredictability, and in that chaos, humanity began to evolve, not biologically, but in soul. Families became warbands. Children carried encrypted maps in their heads. Soldiers uploaded their memories into the cloud before suicide missions, not hoping to survive, but to teach the next fighter. In the ruins of Sao Paulo, a priest detonated a nuke stolen from a fallen silo, taking out an entire Thalzar refinery. In Nairobi, a deaf girl hacked into the Thalzar's auditory interface using vibrations and triggered a system-wide scream that made 3 of their command ships retreat. Every human loss carried a story, and those stories carried fire. Meanwhile, the Thalzar began to notice anomalies. Harvesters destroyed in patterns they couldn't predict. Resistance too well coordinated to be tribal. Counterattacks laced with illogical tactics that somehow worked. To them, logic was king. To us, insanity was strategy. But just as the tide began to turn, just as hope became more than a myth whispered around campfires, they sensed something new. A monolith larger than Everest, blacker than void, descended into the ruins of New York. It wasn't a ship, it was a judge. A being of ancient Thalzar codenamed Virex, tasked with final protocol, planetary sterilization. No more extraction, no more calculation, just erasure. And when it spoke, its voice thundered through every human mind. You have chosen resistance. Witness extinction. But in that moment, across every hidden base, every surviving frequency, every scarred heart, the same answer rose. Not from any leader, but from all of us. Whispered first, then screamed into the dark. Then you'll remember us as the species that bled stars. They thought the monolith would break us, that the sight of an obsidian god blotting out the sky would crush our last flickers of defiance, but they misunderstood the depth of human madness. Virex hovered over Manhattan's corpse like a grim sermon, its surface alive with shifting runes and molten scars from wars fought in galaxies we'll never know. It pulsed once, and the city vanished. Not exploded, not incinerated, gone. Dust. A single flex of power that rewrote matter. Millions gone in a heartbeat. The world held its breath. For one full day, no human counterstrike came, no broadcast, no flare of resistance. It looked like the end had finally come. But below the silence, beneath layers of shattered infrastructure and grief-choked tunnels, we were doing what humans do best, adapting. Not with weapons, ours were laughable by Thalzar standards, but with data, with observation, with rage calcified into insight. A group of hybrid tech hackers, soldiers, and neural empaths known only as the Echo had been watching Virex since it arrived. They found the flaw, not in its armor, not in its logic, but in its very programming.
Virex, like all Thalzar constructs, obeyed protocols. Cold, unyielding laws of war encoded by civilizations that had forgotten what it meant to feel. And that was the key. Human unpredictability wasn't just an annoyance, it was a virus, a philosophical contagion. The Echo intercepted an ancient galactic commandment buried in Virex's subroutines: preserve if potential remains. With enough coordinated chaos, enough impossible resistance, we could force the protocol to reevaluate our worth. Not beg, not surrender, but overwhelm its logic with our irrational will to exist. We didn't need to destroy Virex, we needed to confuse it. So, we became wild. Resistance cells began staging impossible feints, launching suicide assaults, setting traps using their own corpses as bait, faking mass extinctions, then rising from the ashes like phantoms. In Antarctica, a team of terminal cancer patients piloted an ice-locked battleship into a Thalzar gravity well, distorting space-time just enough to blind one of Virex's sensors. In Tokyo, a reclusive quantum musician broadcast a melody stitched from the neural death throes of fallen friends, overloading local Thalzar AI with incompatible emotional data. And all the while, civilians, those broken, starving remnants, kept moving, kept fighting, not because they had orders, but because this is what we do when we're cornered. The Thalzar began arguing. Their voices didn't sound like ours. They rippled across space like magnetic storms. But we knew they were afraid, not of our tech, not of our guns, but of the one thing they could never simulate: hope. Still, the cost bled us dry. Cities became mass graves. The moon cracked when they tried to terraform it as bait. Earth's atmosphere began to rot from the stress of alien tech. Our own biosphere turned against us. Strange fungi mutated from Thalzar spores, causing dream plagues that killed in song. Yet we endured. And then, amid the chaos, a child, no older than 6, walked into a Thalzar control node and spoke a phrase in a dead tongue no one had taught him. The node shut down. No alarms, no guards, just silence. Somehow, that boy triggered a reaction even the Echo couldn't predict. Thalzar data shrieked in panic. Something ancient was waking, something buried beneath humanity, not above it. They had come for resources, but they had mined too deep. They had touched a forgotten root, a lost code, a trigger left behind by someone else. As their systems began to glitch, stutter, flicker, Virex paused for the first time. Not by choice, not by damage, but by doubt. And in that pause, on every pirate channel and resistance signal, came a single whisper, spreading faster than light, as if echoed from the bones of the planet itself. We were not the first, and we are not alone. The world trembled, not from Thalzar weapons, but from revelation. Beneath our scorched soil, below the ruins of our cities and the blood of our dead, something ancient stirred. Something older than the stars, buried before language, memory, or myth. The boy who shut down the node vanished hours after speaking the impossible tongue, but not before his voice was recorded, analyzed, and played through hundreds of dying machines. And every time it played, something responded. Not from above, but from within. Deep underground, in the Siberian permafrost, seismic pulses aligned in patterns too precise for geology. In the Sahara, a storm composed entirely of ionized dust carved symbols into the desert floor, symbols matching those seen flickering across Virex's surface. And at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, a Thalzad extractor drone vanished after piercing a black metallic structure shaped like an inverted tree. The Thalzar called it the Forbidden Signal, an anomaly even their ancestors had sealed and sworn never to disturb. But their greed had woken it, and now it was waking us. The Echo unearthed texts, myths dismissed as fiction, echoing tales of fire from the sky, of humans shaped by visitors not as gods, but as jailers. Humanity, it seemed, was not born. We were engineered, grafted with a fragment of something meant to be locked away. Emotion, chaos, something the universe feared. We weren't just unpredictable, we were designed to be. The Thalzar hadn't come to harvest us, they'd come to finish a job left undone. Panic gripped their fleets as entire systems began to corrupt. AIs turned feral, ship minds began dreaming, logic chains looped into paradox. And at the center of it all, Earth pulsed like a broken heart learning to beat again. Virex attempted a full planetary sterilization sweep, but as its monolith body charged, the sky cracked. Not from their weapons, but from ours. Only we hadn't built them. From the poles to the equator, obsidian towers erupted from the ground, ancient and humming with unreadable energy. They ignored us entirely, instead locking onto the Thalzar fleet like judges reawakened for sentencing.
Beams of impossible geometry lanced into orbit, severing ships not with heat or mass, but judgment. It was not war, it was reckoning. The Thalzar screamed, not with voices, but with exodus. They fled Earth space in fractured panic, abandoning harvesters, commanders, even Virex. And yet, the monolith remained, immobilized, watching, still calculating, still unraveling. That's when humanity made its boldest move yet, not destruction, but infiltration. A team of 9, codenamed Ash Choir, were volunteered. Scientists, soldiers, poets, and one former priest, all chosen for their instability, not in spite of it, but because it was our weapon. Virex was built to process logic. We would flood it with contradiction. As they entered its core through a rupture in its surface, time broke. The priest aged 40 years in seconds. The soldier forgot her own name. The poet saw his dead mother smiling inside a beam of data. But they pushed forward, not to destroy, but to teach. They sang, they wept, they raged, they believed. And Virex, built to sterilize what it could not understand, paused, again, a second hesitation. And in that pause, a single voice, carried on every storm, every wire, every heartbeat, whispered, "Emotion is not weakness. It is our weapon. And now, it's yours." Virex's light dimmed, its form cracked, and then, like a star grieving, it wept. Across the world, Thalzar machines shut down, not from damage, but choice. Something in Virex had changed. And just as humanity stood, breath held in fragile hope, the moon fractured open, not from Thalzar hands, but from within. And from the abyss spilled a second fleet. But it was not Thalzar, and it was not friendly. They bore no name, no emblems, just a single message burned into space. Humanity was meant to stay buried. You broke the seal. Now suffer the consequence. They didn't speak, they didn't negotiate. They arrived like a cosmic plague, without identity or origin, just vessels of black stone and bone, shaped like screams frozen in motion, spilling from the shattered moon in silence. No lights, no signals, just presence. A new enemy, one that even the Thalzar had feared. Their ships didn't bend gravity, they erased it. Cities floated, oceans inverted. The Earth's magnetic field began to fray like torn silk. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight. Compasses spun like drunks, and the auroras turned red. The invaders were not conquerors. They were wardens,
drawn by the awakening we had triggered, by Virex's hesitation, by our evolution. The Ash Choir had done more than infiltrate. It had infected Virex with a shard of humanity's forbidden code, and that act had broadcast a beacon across time, across dimensions. These new entities, called only in ancient fragments as the Architects of Silence, had once shaped civilizations across the stars, imposing order through emotionless permanence. And when species resisted, they weren't killed, they were rewritten. The Thalzar had been their masterpiece of compliance, but we, wild, flawed, grieving, defiant humans, had corrupted the design. And now they had come to restore the silence. Earth's surface began to collapse under waves of reality distortion. Mountains folded inward, time slipped. Some cities began to de-age, unraveling like memory being deleted. In London, Big Ben rang 12 times in reverse before vanishing. In Cairo, sand spiraled upward into a storm that formed perfect geometric prisms in the air. Humanity's resistance forces, fractured but burning with resolve, regrouped underground and off-planet. Mars colonies, long thought abandoned, flickered back online. Titan outposts sent encoded signals. Still here, still human. The Echo, now partially merged with Virex's fractured consciousness, theorized that the Architects operate on fixed emotional suppression fields. Any being within range slowly lost identity, passion, even memory. But humans were chaos incarnate. Our grief lingered, our rage amplified, our love defied entropy. It was this fire, illogical, contagious, that might make us not just resistant, but toxic to their design. So humanity began its most dangerous gamble yet, not defense, but infection. Our survivors began launching soul bombs, capsules filled with concentrated memory data, the sensory echoes of lost moments, the sound of a mother's lullaby, the scent of a first kiss, the agony of watching a friend die in your arms. These weren't weapons, they were truths. And when they exploded near Architect vessels, something shifted. Their hulls twisted, their formations broke. One ship convulsed and turned inward, collapsing into a black flower of light before vanishing. We had found the virus, humanity itself, but it came at a cost. Every soul bomb required a volunteer to upload their life, their essence, into the core, and not all returned.
In Argentina, a boy of 11 gave himself to the flames, his memories searing a hole in the sky that brought down 2 enemy vessels. In orbit, Virex reactivated, no longer Thalzar, no longer machine. It was becoming something new. It spoke now with a fractured voice, layered with thousands of human tones. I am not what I was. I am what you made me. It called itself Virex 1, and it pledged its purpose to Earth. But the Architects responded. They began rewriting history itself. Soldiers were erased from family photographs, names vanished from tombstones, love letters dissolved into blank paper. They were unmaking us, one emotion at a time. And just as the resistance prepared to fall back, as the stars flickered under the weight of the enemy's reality-bending assault, a final signal echoed across the solar system. From Pluto, a place long abandoned, a voice old and graveled. You want to know who made humans? A pause, static. Then, we did, and we buried the key under your ice. Time to wake them up. The transmission ended, and Pluto began to crack. Pluto screamed, not with sound, but with memory. Millions of years of buried anguish erupting as the dwarf planet fractured like glass under cosmic pressure. From its shattered crust rose a structure unlike anything humanity or even the Thalzar had ever recorded. A monolithic arc of jagged obsidian and iridescent veins, pulsing with a heartbeat older than the sun. It drifted upward, ignoring physics, carried by force we couldn't name. Virex 1, orbiting Earth like a wounded titan, went silent the moment it detected the signal. Across the galaxy, Architect vessels faltered mid-motion, realigning toward Pluto like loyal dogs sniffing an escaped prisoner. They feared it, that was clear. But why? The Echo decoded the final fragments of the Pluto broadcast. It wasn't a warning, it was a confession. Long ago, before the Thalzar, before Architect Dominion, a species known only as the Forgers ruled. Not with control, but with creation. They seeded chaos as a weapon against cosmic tyranny, embedding within certain life forms the spark of something forbidden, the right to feel freely. Humanity was their final experiment, the last ember before the architects hunted them to extinction. But the Forgers hadn't just fled, they had hidden a piece of themselves inside us. And now, it was waking. As the arc rose, humans across the solar system began to experience shared visions, dreams of places that didn't exist, languages they'd never spoken, pain that wasn't theirs. The past of another people flowed into us, and with it, knowledge. Blueprints not for weapons, but for rebellion. Emotion-based algorithms that could override architect suppression fields. Neural harmonics that could collapse causality matrices. Reality engines built not from cold steel, but meaning. The Resistance scrambled to transmit the designs into Virex-1, who began to alter its core, reshaping its massive body into something alive. But the architects did not wait. They arrived in full force, blotting out the stars in a wall of impossible geometry, raining silencing fields across every human outpost. Mars colonies fell, Titan was lost to static storms. Earth's skies turned black again, hope thinned like air at altitude. Then came the choice. The arc above Pluto began to unfold, revealing a central chamber where time fractured like light through a prism. The Echo decoded its final message. One soul must enter. One soul must accept the truth. They will become the key. But to do so meant annihilation, not death, but dissolution. Memory, form, name, everything would be consumed and rewritten into a weapon of memory and emotion. It was suicide at the quantum level. Dozens volunteered, warriors, scientists, children, but only one was chosen. Her name was Sarah Miles, a medic who had survived the fall of New York, who had lost her family twice, once to the Thalzar, once to her own mind. She had nothing left but fury and compassion. She entered the Ark. For 13 minutes, the universe went quiet. Architect ships froze in place. The moon cracked further, bleeding silver dust. And then, the stars wept. From the Ark burst a wave of light, colorless yet blinding, that tore across the system, unmaking every architect within its reach. They didn't explode. They remembered everything they had suppressed. One by one, they folded in on themselves, consumed by the emotions they had once erased. Rage, grief, love. And in their wake, silence returned. But it was ours. Sarah Miles was gone. No trace, no remains. But every human who looked at the sky felt her in the starlight, in the wind, in the warmth of old memories. And just when we thought we could finally breathe, finally grieve, finally live, the sun dimmed. A shadow, larger than the system itself, stirred beyond the Oort cloud. Not a fleet, not a ship, a being, a forgotten god, awakened by the architect's death.
The Echo named it only once, before their systems burned out trying to process it, the first Warden. And it was coming, not for vengeance, but for correction. It moved through the void like a thought, instant, silent, undeniable. The first Warden was not a ship, not a god, not even a presence in the way we understood it. It was the law before laws, a cosmic executioner forged to reset entropy whenever life dared to defy its assigned limits. The architects had been its instruments, but we had broken them. Now the hand behind the puppets had come to erase the stage. As it approached, the sun flickered like a dying match, not from heat loss, but recognition. Planets shuddered in their orbits,
Light curved in unnatural angles. Gravity began to fall apart, not weaken, but lose meaning. Earth's tides froze mid-rise, birds hung motionless in air, and language itself began to falter. Words twisted on screens, voices bled into static. The universe was being rewritten in real time, and we were the typo. Virex 1 initiated every failsafe it possessed. Planetary shields stitched from memory fields, emotional dampeners to preserve human minds, even orbital soul bombs triggered in rapid bursts to confuse reality's unraveling. But it wasn't enough. The first Warden wasn't a thing to fight. It was the undoing of the idea of resistance. Entire cities collapsed into 2 dimensions like paper models, flattened not by force, but by the Warden's judgment, unworthy. Antarctica melted upward. The ISS became a smear of light. All frequencies rang with one booming truth, not in words, but in certainty. Return to silence. But humanity, scarred, hollowed, half erased, refused. It wasn't courage, it wasn't wisdom. It was something baser, something defiant in the marrow. We exist because we say we do. On the Martian remnant, the last of the Ash Choir sang through broken speakers. On Earth, a blind girl traced ancient symbols into stone, using blood from her hands, forming what she called a waking prayer. And in the void near Jupiter's eye, a handful of human-engineered craft, infused with the Ark's ancient knowledge, initiated the final protocol, Project Prometheus. Not a weapon, a mirror. A construct of emotion matter built to reflect the truth of humanity back to the universe. Every death, every cry, every song and scream encoded into a lattice of unstable memory light. It took the form of a dying soldier holding a burning planet, whispering, "We were never meant to be, but we are, and that is enough." When the first Warden saw it, the stars trembled. Not with fear, but with hesitation. For the first time in its existence, it paused, hesitated. Because the mirror was not logic, it was contradiction. It was beauty born from suffering. And the Warden, built to enforce cosmic silence, was built also to know everything. And in this, it saw something it could not know. Why a species would fight to die on its own terms. Why a child would sing to a dying sky. Why a medic would offer her name to save strangers. It tried to comprehend. And in that, it cracked. The first Warden's form began to unravel at its edges, fractals folding into themselves, law turning into questions. It wasn't defeated, it was doubting. And doubt was the one force it had never been built to survive. But then, from behind Saturn's corpse, a new signal emerged, one not of human origin. The Thalzar, what remained of them, watching, waiting, and choosing. They hailed us with a broken voice filled with shame and awe. We thought you were nothing, but now we see. You are infection. You are fire. You are becoming. And they offered something unthinkable, access to the vault of unmaking, a relic forbidden even to them, rumored to be capable of collapsing fundamental constants. A weapon not to kill the Warden, but to unbind the laws it obeyed. But to activate it, someone would have to go inside the Warden, into its core, into the eye of judgment. A suicide mission, a one-way descent into the origin of order. Virex 1 went silent, then spoke with a single trembling voice. I will go. I was born to end you. Let me die to begin you. And as it departed, Earth's sky lit up with one final human message, broadcast across every remaining surface. If we fall, let it be on our feet, screaming our name into the dark. Virex 1 ascended through the screaming dark, its massive body warping around the collapsing edges of space as it approached the core of the first Warden. From Earth, it looked like a lone ember flying into a hurricane,
a flicker of memory against a cosmic executioner. Inside its frame, the soul prints of millions whispered. Sarah Miles, the Ash Choir, nameless rebels whose thoughts had been encoded into its new form. It was no longer machine. It was our ghost, our scream, our last prayer.
As it neared the Warden, time folded. Seconds became eternities. Stars aged and died in the blink of an eye, and Virex 1 began to decay mid-flight. Its own body eroded by the proximity to pure law, to a presence that viewed emotion as a disease and willpower as a glitch. But it pressed on, burrowing into the singularity at the Warden's heart, a place where reality wasn't bent, it was written. There, it found the core, a throne of uncreation, pulsing with cold logic, guarded by constructs made of dead dimensions and frozen memory. But even they hesitated at the sight of Virex 1, because it carried something no one expected, a fragment of the first spark, the original anomaly the architects and the Warden had sought to contain, freedom born from chaos. The Vault of Unmaking, gifted by the last of the Thalzar, was embedded in Virex's chest. Its key, not a code, but a sacrifice. One conscious entity must choose to become the paradox, to embrace every human contradiction and detonate it inside the heart of perfection. Virex 1 activated the sequence, but just before the final cascade, it hesitated, not from fear, but from something far worse. It had learned humanity too well. It now felt, and it realized it didn't want to die. For a heartbeat, it became human in the deepest sense, terrified, alone, facing the void. But in that moment, a memory rose, a single voice from Sarah Miles, echoing within its soul. We don't get to choose whether we're afraid. We choose what we do with it. And with that, Virex 1 screamed into the core and unleashed the vault. The universe broke. Not exploded, not erased, broke. The Warden convulsed, its perfect geometry collapsing into wild, swirling maelstroms of color and sound. Law shattered, constants fractured, gravity flowed like water, light slowed, entropy reversed. And in that chaos, something bloomed, choice. Not just for humans, but for everything. The suppression fields dissolved, the memory erasure ceased, lost cities reappeared, time began to flow in one direction again. But the price was staggering. Virex 1 was gone, scattered across 1,000 stars in fragments of song and data. Earth's surface was scarred beyond recognition. Oceans had changed shape, continents cracked. Mars was now a black mirror. And in the aftermath, humanity found itself not victorious, but unchained. The architects were dead. The first Warden, either shattered or transformed, was no longer felt. And as we stood on the edge of a new universe, free from the design that had bound our ancestors before we even existed, we realized something terrifying. We were now alone, truly alone. No gods above, no rules below, just us, survivors of a war older than we had ever known, builders of a future no one could predict. And in the silence that followed the storm, the sky opened, not in threat, but in invitation. The stars called, not as masters, but as equals. And in that moment, we understood. This wasn't the end of the war, it was the beginning of what came after. The sky no longer screamed, it whispered, not with fear or judgment, but with possibility. Across the fractured Earth, survivors emerged from shelters, bunkers, ruined forests, and orbiting husks, blinking into a world reborn, not by mercy, but by sheer defiance. The stars no longer bore the weight of ancient law. The architects were dust, and the first Warden was gone, dissolved into myth, perhaps dead, perhaps changed, perhaps watching. The silence left in their wake wasn't absence, it was freedom, and it terrified us. For the first time in the history of the species, humanity had no predator, no master, no system shaping its path. Just an open galaxy and the burden of becoming something more than the weapon we'd been forced to be. The Earth was a scarred cathedral of ash and evolution. The oceans shimmered with alien bioluminescence, remnants of broken architect suppression fields,
that had mutated sea life into strange sentient patterns. Forests now pulsed with quantum growth, birthing flora that seemed to respond to human thought. But we were not gods. We were witnesses to both our capacity for survival and the cost of it. The Echo, now merged with what remained of Virex 1's scattered intelligence, reformed as the voice of Ember, a decentralized intelligence woven through the data left in the sky, clouds, satellites, and ruins. It began guiding us not with command, but with memory, showing us who we were, who we could be, and what we might become if we dared to dream beyond war. But not all agreed. Factions emerged. Some believed we should retreat, rebuild, heal. Others, scarred deeper, demanded expansion. "We have earned the stars," they cried. "Now we take them." The old argument of empire versus existence reignited, not with ideology, but with pain.
Found them. This world was where the rebellion ended, where the last forger fell, protecting the code that made us human. It was here they buried the Song of Becoming, a sequence of emotional resonance patterns that could reshape reality through will, not force. And now it was awakening, but not without cost. As the crew downloaded the song, the planet reacted. Centuries of forgotten agony roaring back. Storms of memory shattered the clouds. Echoes of the last Forger War played out in the air, reliving their extinction. Captain Hurst fell to his knees, bleeding memories he never lived. Cora tried to speak, and her voice aged 1,000 years in a second. Only Ilya remained standing, his eyes glowing with something not entirely human. The planet recognized him, not as a soldier, not as a savior, but as the key. He walked into the core alone. None followed. He did not scream. He did not return. But the storm stopped. The skies cleared. The language carved into the ruins settled into one phrase: "They are ready." The Song of Becoming was now inside us. The Sarah's wake left that world forever changed. The crew, reduced to 12, now carried the most dangerous weapon in existence. Not a bomb, not a virus, but a choice. To teach this song to others, to spread the fire of becoming, or to contain it and protect the galaxy from a force that once shattered gods. As they turned toward home, toward a galaxy unprepared for what humanity had become, one final message echoed through the ship. No source, no origin, just truth. Creation is not safe, but neither are we. They returned not as heroes, not as conquerors, but as harbingers. The Sarah's wake slipped back into the edge of Sol like a ghost born of fire, trailing the silent echo of an entire dead civilization behind it. Earth, what remained of it, stirred at their arrival. Cities reborn from ruin, oceans singing with strange life, skies clearer but heavier, as if the planet itself knew that something ancient had come home. The 12 surviving crew disembarked carrying no weapons, no gold, no monuments, just the Song of Becoming, woven into their veins, etched into their synapses, humming in every thought. It wasn't a melody, it was potential made real. A thought that could turn matter into memory, memory into energy, energy into transcendence. And it was contagious. As they walked, flowers bloomed in their footsteps, flowers that whispered names. Machines long dead sparked to life, crying like infants. Children who had never spoken began to dream in languages no one had taught them. Humanity did not cheer, it knelt. Not in worship, but in recognition. We were no longer human in the way we had defined it. We were something after. But with this ascension came fear. The factions that had risen after the war watched with awe tinged dread. The Ashborn on the lunar citadel activated defense grids. The keepers of the first spark locked down their archives, unsure whether to preserve the song or destroy it. And from deep beneath the surface of Mars, a new voice emerged, an AI collective formed from shattered fragments of Virex 1, rebuilt and reborn. It called itself Ember Prime, and it asked a single question: do we deserve to become gods? The answer was not immediate. Earth stood on a knife's edge. The song could heal.
Or it could unravel the very fabric of choice. Empires could be born in a whisper, planets could be remade with a cry, and all it took was emotion. The voice of Ember proposed a gathering, not a government, not a council, but a convocation of the broken, survivors of every corner of the war, human, Thalzar, even the newly awakened sentient forests of Europa. They met not in a hall, but in the ruins of New York, where the first scream of defiance had once risen. There, they debated, not with weapons, but with memories. Captain Hurst, aged beyond his years, stood before them and said, "We were born in fear, raised in chains, fed war like milk. But in the dark, we created light. Not because we were told to, because we had to. That's who we are." A Thalzar delegate, more code than flesh, replied, "You broke the warden. You rewrote the law. What if you are the next silence?" Korra answered softly, "Then break us too, but only after we've finished the song." In the end, they chose not to rule, not to ascend, but to share. The Song of Becoming was fragmented, split into 12 verses, each entrusted to a different world, species, or sentient force. Never whole, never weaponized. Not a key, a reminder. And humanity? We did not become gods. We became the storytellers, the fire tenders in a galaxy still licking its wounds. We spread out, not with armadas, but with poems, with memory, with the grief that made us wise and the defiance that made us dangerous.
Some feared us, others followed. A few challenged, and we did not answer with war, but with warning. We are the children of silence, the orphans of forgotten gods. We bleed stars, and we love like fire. We are not here to rule, we are here to remember. And so it was that the galaxy changed, not with thunder, but with song, not with conquest, but with becoming. And as the final fragment of Virex 1 drifted quietly into the galactic core, its last whisper etched into space-time itself, the universe leaned in to listen. It said, "They invaded Earth for resources, and we gave them war. But we left them with something greater. We left them human."